all of the rich historical colorations to be manifest in talking about our finitude. Being born of a woman in stank and stench, what I'd call funk. Being introduced to the funk of life in the womb and the love push that gets you out. Right? And then your body is not just death, but the way Vico talks about it. Here, Vico is so much better than Heidegger. Vico talks about it in terms of being a corpse. See, Heidegger doesn't talk about corpses. He talks about death. It's still too abstract. Absolutely. Read the poetry of John Donne. He'll tell you about corpses that decompose. Well, see, that's history. That's the raw, funky, stanky stuff of life. That's what bluesmen do. See, that's what jazzmen do. See, I'm a blues man in the life of the mind. I'm a jazz man in the world of ideas. Therefore, for me, music is central. So when you're talking about poetry, for the most part, Plato was talking primarily about words, whereas I talk about notes, I talk about tone, I talk about temper, I talk about rhythms. See, for me, music is fundamental. Philosophy must go to school not only with the poets, philosophy needs to go to school with the musicians. Keep in mind, Plato bans the flute in the Republic, but not the lyre. Why? Because the flute appeals to all of these various sides of who we are, given his tripartite conception of the soul, the rational and the spirited and the appetitive. And the flute appeals to all three of those, where he thinks the lyre on one string only appeals to one, and therefore is permissible. Now, of course, the irony is when Plato was on his deathbed, what did he do? Well, he requested the Thracian girl to play music on the flute. I'm a Christian, but I'm not a Puritan. I believe in pleasure. And orgiastic pleasure has its place. Intellectual pleasure has its place. Social pleasure has its place. Televisual pleasure has its place. You know, I like certain TV shows. My God, when it comes to music, you know, Beethoven's 32nd Sonata, Opus 111, unbelievable aesthetic pleasure. Same would be true for Curtis Mayfield, the Beatles, or what have you. There's a certain pleasure of the life of the mind that cannot be denied. It's true that you might be socially isolated because you're in the library at home and so on, but you're intensely alive. In fact, you're much more alive than these folk walking these streets of New York in crowds, which is no intellectual interrogation and questioning going at all. But if you read, you know, John Ruskin, or you read a Mark Twain, or my God, Herman Melville, you almost had to throw the book against the wall because you're almost so intensely alive that you need a break.
You get electrified.
Exactly. It's time to take a break and get a little dullness in your life, you know. Take Moby Dick, throw it against the wall the way Goethe threw von Gleiss's work against the wall. It was just too much. It reminded Goethe of the darkness that he was escaping after he overcame those suicidal impulses we saw as a young brother in the 1770s and made his move toward neoclassicism in Weimar. There are certain things that make us too alive, almost. It's almost like being too intensely in love. You can't do anything. It's hard to get back to chronos, hard to get back to everyday life, you know what I mean? That kairotic dimension of being in love with another person. Everything is so meaningful, you want to sustain it. You just can't do it, you know? You got to go to the bathroom, have a drink of water, shit. Romanticism thoroughly saturated the discourse of modern thinkers. Can you totalize? Can you make things whole? Right. Can you create harmony? If you can't, disappointment. Disappointment is always at the center. Failure is always at the center. But where does the romanticism come from? Why begin with romanticism? See, I don't begin with romanticism. No, you remember what Beethoven said on his deathbed, you know? He said, I've learned to look at the world in all of its darkness and evil and still love it. And that's not romantic Beethoven. This is the Beethoven of the string quartets, of 131, the greatest string quartet ever written, not just in classical music, but of course it's European forms. Beethoven is the grand master. But string quartet